He opened the barn like every morning. Left hand pushed the wooden latch, right hand still held the usual habit, a rusty iron rod to rattle in case of rats. Eyes not yet adjusted to the outside light, but his head already recognized the old scent, damp, sharp with dried dung and cracked salt ash. Only one thing was off: Merla's boots. Placed neatly next to the salt barrel, toes facing inward, soles clean, one ankle folded as if someone had taken them off without using hands. She usually didn't leave things here. Merla always got up earlier than him. Those boots, if not on her feet, should have been on the doorstep, by the cloth covering her hem. He stepped one step further. No footprints leading out. The barn's dirt floor, the dampest spot, remained untouched. No drag marks, no heel streaks, no flattened straw. Only the rope, hanging from the beam, dripping water. Droplets fell onto the floor mat, forming a pale gray blotch that slowly spread, like animal skin soaking cold. Nothing was hanging on the rope. But the coil curled, exactly like the shape of a head bent down. He didn't call, didn't step fully in either, just stood there, eyes fixed on the left boot, where the stitching had come undone. Just a thread, but clear. The last time he saw it was the day before, when she bent down to draw water for the goats. Her foot was still in it then. Now it wasn't. Wind slipped through the wall crack. The barn's smell mixed again, old fire, unwashed sweat, and something like steam from a half-boiled fetus. He sat down, not fully, just one knee. Fingers touched the boot, not warm, not cold, but the inner sole was still damp, like someone had just taken it off and laid it down with both hands, carefully, without tipping it. No sign of running, no sign of force, just something deliberately left behind. In the corner of the barn, the wooden table she used to sharpen knives had been pushed sideways. The chair folded, leaned against the wall, as if someone had quietly withdrawn last night after a heavy decision. He walked out of the barn, didn't close the door. The boots still lay inside, facing inward. Things that face inward are usually meant to avoid being seen when walking away. He didn't search, didn't call, just went home. Washed his hands, longer than usual, but not hard, then sat down. Eggs untouched, water not yet boiling, but he'd already set out a second plate, only no one came to use it. When he brought her home, he didn't introduce her, didn't look at anyone as they passed the market path. 3 goats, a wooden cart, and an old chest sealed with wax at all 4 corners. No one asked anything. The woman who traded the goats was Merla's old aunt, only said, "Just let her go with you," and carried the chest herself like she'd done it many times. No help needed, no questions about which room. She entered, sat on the rotting chair near the ash stove, and didn't remove her headscarf all afternoon. The chest had 2 locks, one brass, one leather loop laced with red thread. Old but solid, as if it didn't hold objects but held discipline. He looked at her for a while, then said a single sentence: "Stay, I'll feed you." Nothing more, no follow-up, no title, no terms. That sentence felt like tying a post rope, not too tight, not loose. Just enough for the other to know, there's still a rope, and you still stay within reach. She nodded, a head tilt so faint it was hard to tell if she accepted or just waited for more. But he said nothing else, and she made her bed in the back left corner, 4 steps from him, no closer, no farther. That night, he didn't fall asleep right away, because of the chest. It creaked twice, then fell silent. Not the wind, not a rat. It was the sound of wood when someone gently pulls, then stops, as if someone meant to open but wasn't ready to see what's inside. Next morning the chest was still locked. Only difference was, the lock had turned slightly to the right. The chest sat at her bed's foot, never moved, never gathered dust. Bottom right leg showed wear, not from rats, but from a hand touching it nightly to check if it was still there. Merla's hand was small, but her wrist calloused like someone used to carrying water. He didn't touch it, not out of respect, but because he noticed, every time the chest stirred, she exhaled. Some nights, wind slipped through the unlatched window, blew in dry leaves across the floor. He opened his eyes, saw her sitting by the chest, no lamp, no shawl. Left hand on the lock, right hand on her knee, steady, still, like a guard, like a guardian. When he shifted, she didn't turn, just said quietly, without looking, "It's asleep now." Tone wasn't gentle, just a report, not for him, but for herself. Another night, he heard a soft cough, unhurried, shallow, not a sick sound, but of someone long unspoken. But when he glanced, she still lay, back turned, no pillow, breathing even. Only the chest, still shut. But moonlight through the gap in the door hit the lock just right, glinting as if wet. He didn't ask, not out of fear, but because, just like someone inside, pulling it shut. After that, he changed the door latch. Didn't lock it, but placed a small iron rod beside the chest. Tip sharpened, only meant to test wood, never tested it. But every night, he wiped it clean with an old shirt, not to prevent rust, but because, whatever lived in this house, he didn't want it seeing a dirty rod. The smallest nanny goat limped, didn't cry, but the rear left leg curled, unwilling to press fully to the ground. He bent to check, found something caught in the hoof. A soft wire loop, as if once wrapped around an ankle, then slipped off. Not a barn rope, not a feeding tether, but a new wire. No rust, no dirt, like just peeled off skin. Under the hoof clung a strand of twisted hair, black, coarse, not goat hair. He said nothing, just took his cutter, snipped the wire, clutched the removed piece, wrapped it in dry banana leaf, tucked it into his pocket. Didn't burn, didn't toss. That afternoon, he sat on the porch, gazing at the yard. The goats didn't eat much. They just stood, heads down, as if waiting for orders. No bleating, no stomping. Just stood facing the barn wall. She didn't leave the house. Her door remained closed all day. Only the chest made a light sound near noon. Once. Then silence. He pulled the wire from his pocket, straightened it, placed it on the wooden table, every fold clear. There were bent marks, as if once wound around something round and alive. When the sun angled across, he saw clearly a dent on the wire, like once tightened, then suddenly loosened, as if someone pulled their hand out, or no longer had one to hold. That night he checked the trough. Nothing missing. No bite marks. But the hay smelled different. Not mold, but like someone had sprayed poison, then washed too late. She didn't ask. Didn't glance over when he washed his hands more thoroughly. Just placed an extra cloth on the windowsill. Said nothing. When he went to bed, he placed the wire right under his pillow, not to guard against her, not for the goats, but for himself in case he opened the chest by mistake during the night. That morning, she boiled water before him. The fire was already red when he stepped out the back door. Not much smoke, but the kettle carried the scent of ash, like someone had started the fire since midnight. He didn't ask. She didn't speak, just placed an empty teacup beside her own, then withdrew into her room. The goat still ate back, didn't insist. Didn't walk past him either, just stood like someone placing a stone in a stream, not blocking water, but splitting its course. He looked at the rope. It no longer smelled like hemp. It smelled like ash, and something like bark, dried but not yet peeled of its bitterness. He took it, not because he agreed, but because not taking it would mean having to say something, and he didn't have the words. From that day on, she went to the barn alone, carried a kerosene lamp with a wick shorter than usual, not to shine, just enough to light her own footsteps. Her steps didn't echo on the ground. They sank into the damp grass. He still woke early as before, still tied the hay bundle, but on her return she said nothing. No complaints, no thanks, just quietly placed her boots on the step, hung her coat on the wooden peg, then went inside to wash her hands. One night he tried to step out earlier, but the barn was already locked before he left the porch. The lock clicked firmly, but the rope was looped in a strange way. No knot, no tuck, yet no one could remove it without knowing exactly where to pull. Next day he tried to open it. Didn't work. Tried again. Still no. Only when he closed his eyes and followed the way she used to hold it did the latch release. Inside, nothing changed. No signs of struggle, no blood. But one nanny goat had a patch of fur shaved along her belly, right by the milk line. No cuts, no pus. Just the hair in that spot grew in the opposite direction of the rest of the body. He didn't lock it again, just slid the latch softly and walked back. That night she didn't mention the barn, just handed him a cup of tea, left hand holding, right hand stained with dirt. Didn't wash, didn't hide, her eyes didn't look up, but didn't look down either. Just looked to the same old spot, where the iron rod he always sharpened still lay untouched. He often slept later than her, not intentionally, just that ever since the chest made sounds, his sleep hadn't been steady. Just when his eyes began to droop, something in the yard would wake him. That night was no different. The moon was thin, just enough to cast the barn roof in pale yellow. No wind, no sound. Only a faint light inside the barn, not from a lamp. It didn't flicker, didn't pulse. No shadows, no edges of light through the slats. Just a glow that made the dirt floor outside glisten, like the skin of someone running a mild fever. He stepped outside, didn't bring a lamp, just walked by memory, dodging uneven stones. The ground beneath was just the smell of undercooked roasted meat mixed with rice ash. From the bottom gap, where a plank had broken, came a soft scraping sound. Not goat hooves, not claws either. It was thinner, longer, scratching in a rhythm. 3, pause, 2, pause, then stopped. He didn't knock, just stared into the darkness, and realized the light inside wasn't shining out. It was being drawn inward, slowly, like something living beneath the barn's skin. When he turned away, no doors opened, no voices came. But by the time he reached the house steps, her boots were already neatly placed on the porch, a hand span apart, toes facing inward. exactly like the ones he'd seen in the barn that morning. But this time, there was dirt on the soles, wet. Next morning, he went to the barn, not to inspect anything, just to look at the soil where he'd stood last night. Nothing remained. The soft dirt had dried, but dried in a way as if something had licked all the moisture away. The wood wall was no longer warm. The scent had vanished. Only one strand of hair remained, not white, not black, but silver gray, stuck in the rope hook's crevice. He used tweezers to pluck it, wrapped it in old newspaper, then left it on the table. Didn't burn it, didn't hide it, just left it, like a question no one planned to answer. That night, she brought back a chunk of hardwood from an old chode tree, placed it beside the stove. Didn't say what for, but that wood, when burned, didn't catch fire, just released thin smoke, fragrant like eucalyptus leaves. He asked for the first time, voice rough, not pressing. "Where'd you get that wood?" She looked at him, didn't answer, just tilted her head, then said slowly, "It wasn't taken, it was returned." The water trough behind the barn had been cracked for a while. He hadn't removed it. The crack hadn't reached the bottom. Water still pooled, just leaked in slow drips, enough for the baby goats to lick at noon. But that day, when he bent down to check why the water suddenly darkened, he found what lay inside. A scalpel blade, wooden handle split, blade tip faintly serrated, like it had shaved bone, lying tilted in mossy water, not new, not rotted either, but clear enough to read 3 faint, hand-carved words on the blade. "Don't let it hurt." He picked it up, handle wet, metallic smell. Unclear if from the blade or the surrounding water. But the way the knife stayed in the kitchen, slicing ginger to dry on the floor. The ginger scent mingled with ash in the house, making his throat itch, like someone rubbing lime powder under his skin. That evening, he placed the knife on the table. Didn't wipe it, didn't put it away, just left the mud and carving intact, blade facing the door. She looked, didn't touch, just took a clean cloth, laid it underneath the knife, then walked away. No words, but when she passed behind him, he clearly heard her breath, slow, compressed, like someone walking away from where they shouldn't have been. Midnight, he got up for water, jug empty. What remained in the ceramic bowl was dark, cloudy. He didn't drink. Outside, the wind picked up. Not strong, but enough to make the door tremble softly. The creaking wasn't random, like a hand pushing in short beats. He opened the door, no one in the yard. But the knife on the table was gone. The cloth beneath remained, neat, untouched. Next morning, in the barn, the trough was completely dry, no overflow, no new cracks, only a small scratch on the rim, deep to the wood's core. Beneath the drainage gap, the knife lay there, blade wedged into the slot, handle pointing up, as if someone stabbed it there, but didn't want it removed. She came to the barn after him, didn't look surprised, just said, "That knife was meant for cows, not goats." No explanation, no turning away, just said, like reading an old sign aloud. Then left him standing, staring at the knife that was no longer clean, and no longer needed hiding. Since the night that knife was returned to the trough, he never slept deeply again. Eyes closed, but ears alert. He could hear straw dropping from the wall. But what he waited for wasn't straw. It was the creaking of the barn boards opening and closing, slow, steady, like someone trying not to be caught, but not in a hurry. By the third night, he stopped waiting. He went to the porch, sat quietly, didn't bring a lamp, didn't bring a knife, just his old coat, and the rock he kept since the first time he sat. Guarding his first batch of birthing goats, crescent moon, dimly blurring the barn wall, door ajar. Through the gap he saw Merla crouched, not leaning down but tilted to the side, as if whispering to something lying on the floor. Her hand pulled out a cloth smeared with dirt, that coarse brown sack used to cover dead goats in dry season. But the cloth wasn't dirty. On the contrary, flat, firm, like smoothed daily. At one corner was a patch of stitched cowhide. Right. He squinted, looked at the barn floor. No shadow of her fell across it. Only a low, long shadow, out of proportion with any human body, shifting beneath the cover. A faint clink. Merla pulled out something like a short copper pipe, held it close to the thing's ear. Didn't speak, didn't soothe, just held it there, then nodded very slowly. When she stood up, the thing stopped too. No whimper, no crawl, just lay there, as if it knew its breath depended on her staying close. Merla bent down, one last time, touched the cloth's edge gently, then folded one corner over, sealing it, tied 2 knots with rope, used slushy barn mud to press along the edges, as if afraid light might sneak in. She walked away, didn't lock the door, didn't close the planks, left everything just as it was. Her hand brushed dust slowly, from wrist to shoulder, then stood for a while, before heading toward the kitchen, without lighting a lamp. He sat still until morning, didn't enter, didn't call, didn't move, just listened to something beneath the barn floor, still, breathing, offbeat, like trying to mimic a human's breath, but failing. That morning, she poured water for him, strong tea, not hot. The cup had a small crack at the rim. He had never used that cup before. It had 3 cross-hatched marks on the bottom, the kind his father used to mark anything not meant to be touched. He didn't drink, just set it down. There was steam inside, but the bottom was dry. That noon, he walked behind the barn, not to go in, just to peer through the broken spot beneath the roof. No people, no creature, just a round shape the size of a child, fully wrapped in burlap. The sack was smeared with mud, but bore scratch marks from the inside. Scratches from within, not deep, not torn, but consistent, 5 at a time, like someone counting time by clawing. He didn't call her, didn't tell anyone, just walked back, slowly. At the porch, he snapped a dry twig and tucked it into his sleeve near the heart. Not for protection, just so, if it came to choosing, he wouldn't use bare hands. That night, the wind shifted. Not cold, but dry. The kind of dry that made his spine creak with every turn. He didn't sleep. Beneath his pillow was still the snapped branch, sharpened at one end, still unused. Out in the yard, the barn stood open, the door not fully shut, the latch slanted, like someone had just left, or not yet entered. From the porch, he saw dim light slipping through the barn because she was already sitting there. Merla sat with her back against the door, arms wrapped tight around her knees, face tilted, hair disheveled, collar undone, not asleep. Eyes open, but not looking at him, not looking at anything at all, as if she'd been sitting there a long time, or had just sat down, for a reason so old it no longer needed saying. He didn't call, didn't ask, just stood and watched long enough to know She wasn't blocking, but neither was she leaving. She wasn't telling him to back off, but neither was she making way. The barn door behind her cracked open 2 finger joints wide. From there, a thin breath slipped out. No smoke, no scent, but with a sound like someone hissing faintly through clenched teeth. He stepped 1 foot forward. She didn't move, but her shadow, cast by the barn's inner light, carved clean into the ground like it had been cut with a blade. Didn't flicker, didn't stretch. Rigid, like the shadow of a statue, not a person. "You think you want to see it?" she spoke, softly. Her voice wasn't cold, but utterly free of pleading. He didn't answer. She didn't wait, just lowered her head slightly, enough for her shadow to swallow the strip of light behind her. The moon climbed high. He still stood. She still sat. The thing inside didn't make a sound, but its breathing he heard through the ground. It wasn't fast, wasn't slow. It breathed like it once was human, but now forgot where breath belonged in the chest. He turned away, slowly, not out of fear, but because he didn't want his shadow to cross her face. When he stepped onto the porch and turned back, the barn door was closed. No sound, no latch, no figure. Only an old cloth lay where she had sat, right at the threshold. The cloth stained with a long streak of mud and a curled white hair. Not goat, not human. Nothing he'd ever raised or eaten. He picked up the cloth, didn't fold it, just held it in his hand to keep the coarse, damp feel and the trace of fresh wind, the kind of wind that only blew when the thing in the chest no longer lay still. That morning, the sky dimmed like rain, but didn't rain. No mist, but the grass was wet. His body itched, like caught in a wind chill, though it wasn't cold. Just as he washed his face, he heard a dry, cracked cry, not a you straight ahead, unblinking. He bent down, touched one. Wet fur, but not warm. Cold skin, but not soft. Like touching fake hide stretched over something heating up from within. Merla stepped in after, not hurried, not surprised, just tied her hair with the same old cloth, then stood and watched. She didn't touch, didn't help, just said one sentence. "Don't let anyone touch them." Not loud, not commanding, just a statement, as if he had just witnessed a ritual and now must let it continue. He looked at the newborns again. They didn't nurse, didn't seek, but one by one began turning their heads toward the cloth covering the old firewood pile in the barn's corner. They stood, aligned, no crowding, no retreat, as if they knew not to look at the rancher, but to face where they were called from. One, the smallest, trembled slightly, but not from cold. Its leg twitched in rhythm, exactly like a human heartbeat. He meant to step forward. Then Merla said, without turning, "If you touch it, it'll come back." He froze. She walked past empty-handed, moved close to the kids. None flinched, just followed her, with eyes not yet opened, but already seeing. All morning they didn't leave the barn, didn't eat, didn't sleep, didn't play. By afternoon, one suddenly sat, back arched, mouth open, but no sound came. Only wind slipped through its throat, forming a noise like wood being sawed through its spine. The other two remained standing, heads slightly tilted, as if listening or responding. That night he locked the barn, not out of routine, but out of instinct. Rope looped 3 times, tight, even though she didn't say to. After closing the door, he pulled from his pocket a piece of beeswax, something he hadn't used in a long time, and pressed it into the lock. Not to seal it, just so if anyone opened it, he would know. The night was silent, but in his dream he saw the 3 goats standing at the corner of the yard, staring into the house. No eyes, no noses, just bodies, tilted at the exact same angle. The same angle. The next morning, the lock was intact, wax untouched, door still closed. But on the back wall of the barn were 3 fine cracks, parallel, like horn marks pressed from the inside, not strong, but even. He waited until she was asleep. All week he hadn't stepped into the barn alone. There was always a footstep, or dark, but as if the light was being held mid-air by something, refusing to fall. No goats, no breathing. Only the smell of mud mixed with ash, and the scorched metal scent, like someone once boiled medicine with blood. In the barn's corner, the old cloth used to cover firewood had been removed. Beneath it was a metal drum, lid slightly domed, tied with layers of hemp rope. He untied it, slowly, not out of fear, but because each knot undone felt like waking something forced to sleep too long. The lid popped. No sound, just a thin warmth rising, like the last breath of someone passing quietly. Inside was a bovine fetus, but not a calf, about the size of a full-term newborn, skin wrinkled, hairless, forelegs curled tight to its belly, hind legs stretched straight, anatomically wrong. No blood, no umbilical cord, mouth sewn shut with copper wire. No nostrils, no pupils in the eyes, but the chest was rising and falling, slow, even, human-paced. He didn't back away, didn't vomit, just stood there, and gripping the drum's rim. Wind from outside couldn't enter the barn, like it was being pushed back. He leaned closer. The fetus twitched slightly, very slightly, like a spasm in someone's dream, touched by a memory they don't want to remember. At the corner of its mouth, just enough space for the copper wire to loop through, sat a droplet, clear, didn't drip, didn't dissolve, just clung there. A single tear. From where? When it had no eyes to cry. He reached in, not to touch, just to nudge the lid closed again. But the fetus turned its head. Not sudden, not lunging, just turned, as if it knew who he was, and wanted him to look, once, before he did something he couldn't undo. He straightened up, tied the rope back, not tight, not secure, just enough. As he turned away, he heard a faint tapping on the drum's bottom. 3 taps, spaced apart, like someone tapping in code. Out in the yard, he didn't go straight inside, just stood under the sky, looked down at his right hand. A thin line from the copper wire had marked his middle finger. No blood, no cut, just a sting, like a mark, light, enough to remember, but not something to ever tell. The next day he didn't go to the barn, didn't touch the water trough, just sat on the porch, back resting against the worn beam, unbound. She stood before him, didn't lower her voice, didn't apologize, just asked bluntly, "You went in?" He nodded. No explanation, no reaction, just nodded like a man admitting he had stepped through a door he hadn't known was a door. Merla sat beside him, not close, not far, a distance just enough so a third person couldn't fit in, but not enough to be called familiar. After a while, she said, not slow, not trembling, "I wasn't married off." He still looked at the copper wire in his hand. She continued, "No one made me come here. I chose it. I needed a place quiet enough, poor enough, and someone who wouldn't ask too much." He didn't react, not because he felt insulted, but because in that sentence he heard his own name, even if it wasn't spoken. Then she told, as if to someone she didn't know, "My father was the first to cut spinal cords of purebreds to see if their blood could bear hybrids. He failed 16 times. The 17th, my mother died." He didn't interrupt, didn't breathe louder. She went on, "I had no trade. No one hires a girl who buried her mother with bare hands, just to keep the unborn child's blood from spilling on the ground." Her voice wasn't bitter, not choked, just like reading a long-forgotten inventory. So I took his final experiment, not to continue, just to end it, but not somewhere anyone knew me. He looked up for the first time in hours. Why me? She looked back, not judging, not pitying. "Because you traded 3 goats and didn't ask who I was. I needed someone like that, because if you had asked, you wouldn't have kept me here." Wind passed through. Leaves turned in the yard. A strand of straw drifted from the barn, caught in her hair. She didn't pull it out. He stood, didn't go anywhere, just stood, facing the barn. "If I gave that thing to the authorities," his voice low, steady, "what would they do with it?" Merla didn't answer right away. Then, after a silence, she said, "No one would dare keep it, but no one would dare destroy it either." Another pause, then softer, "And I don't believe they'd let it die, if they saw it breathing." He looked toward the barn. The cloth covering the drum was lightly pulsing, even though no wind could pass through the slats. In his mind, every odd detail now fit together. The locked chest, the scalpel, the night fire, the goats that stood like men, all of it, not aftermath, but preface, from the start. From before he knew someone named new breed. Next morning he rose early. Not because he heard anything, not out of habit, just simply couldn't lie down anymore. Sitting on the porch, he looked toward the barn. Door slightly ajar. The cloth still in place. Nothing audible from here, but he could feel something inside was still awake, still listening, and still remembered the night before. He stepped down into the yard, unhurried. Didn't look back. Carried an old bicycle chain, the one once used to lock the grain shed, rusted halfway but not broken. At the barn he didn't go in, just stood at the door. For a long time. Not to think, but to verify. Verify the feeling. Was this still a barn, or had it become something else? No scratching, no breath. But the smell in the wooden walls had changed. No more dung, no more hay, only ash, and something like half-burned semen. He didn't check, didn't open. Just gripped the handle, and wrapped the chain twice around the vertical beam. No knot, no lock. Just coiled, wedging a small stick between the loops, as if needed, one yank would open it. Not locked, but no one could open it unless they knew how. When he turned, Merla was standing in the yard, hair tied up, bare hands, eyes not questioning, mouth not speaking, but her body leaned slightly, like someone who had foreseen this decision, only didn't know whether he'd make it in the morning or evening. He stepped closer, stopped 3 paces from her. "It's not coming out," he said. Not a question, not a promise. She nodded, not agreeing, not opposing. "I'm not taking it anywhere anymore," she replied. Didn't wait for him to nod. They said no more. Didn't speak of goats. Didn't mention the 3 young ones, who now had finally laid down for the first time in days, laying in the same direction. Not curled, not belly up, just limbs stretched, heads turned toward the barn, as if the barn was not where they were born, but where they were buried. He walked back into the house. Before stepping over the threshold, he took down the kerosene lamp under the eave, the one never lit since Merla came. Brought it inside, set it at the center of the table, filled it with oil, lit the flame. Didn't shine it on anything, didn't read anything, just let it burn. That night, no one slept, but no one stayed awake either. Only the lamp on the table burned dimly, as if something beneath decomposed remains. He didn't ask, because from that day they shared an unwritten rule. Don't open. Don't bring it out. Don't call it by name. Rain fell without warning. No thunder. Just one heavy drop straight to the nape as he lit the stove, then another, and a third. Then it poured, like someone had tipped the sky's awning. 3 roof tiles on the barn had broken since last season. He hadn't patched them, thought it wouldn't rain. Now the rain poured straight through onto the barn wall. No sound came from inside. No cry, no knock, no footstep. But from the water trough at the side, where the bamboo pipe drained water to the fields, something black began to flow out. Not black like dirt, not thick like mud, but a black like blood, half dried by the wind, half congealed, half alive. He ran, hatless, stood before the trough. Rain poured over both shoulders, eyes filled with water, but he saw clearly. What flowed from the trough wasn't rainwater. It seemed to flow on its own. The bamboo wasn't broken, no overflow. There was simply a stream pushing out from inside the barn, through the soil bottom, into the trough, and away. The black water didn't spread, didn't dilute, just ran in a clean line, cutting a mark through the mud, through the grass, leaving a streak of purplish blue, like a scar being opened again. He reached out to catch it. The first scent was burnt hair. The second, crushed ginger. The last, the scent of a goat's teat after a miscarriage, cold, slick, something that never got to live, but already had to die. Merla appeared behind him. No head covering, no words. She also looked at the black stream, didn't ask where it came from, didn't say what to do, just pulled a crumpled vong leaf from her pocket and dropped it into the trough. The leaf floated. Normally it would drift, but here it spun in place, didn't sink, didn't move, just turned, like held by an invisible fingertip. When he returned to the barn, he didn't open the door, just stood beside it. The rain had soaked the soil, but the barn floor was still dry. Dry like each sip of water had been pulled straight down, like something beneath was thirsty but didn't drink, just kept. The door hadn't opened. The scent wasn't strong, but the wooden wall bore a long stain, like blood had crawled out from inside and been half-washed by the rain. He bent down. At his feet, a strange mark. 3 toes, not round, not cloven, not like goat hooves, not like cattle, more like something remained beneath the field, and a twisted trail like hair pulled from someone still alive. At night he sat and wiped his axe. Didn't sharpen, just wiped, stroke by stroke. She didn't ask. Just placed a piece of stale bread on the table, then went to her room. Didn't latch the door. The night wasn't long, just heavy. Heavy like there was nothing left to bleed. But the land still remembered. The morning after rain, the sky wasn't clear. Only a pale light like yellowed paper. No wind, no rooster. No footsteps from the other room. He sat up, placed a hand on the table. The axe was still there, untouched, blade still wet, even though he clearly remembered drying it the night before. Outside, the black blood at the trough had crusted, stuck to the ground like shallow veins in stone. No more smell, no more tracks. He went to the barn. The chain still wrapped around the post, but had slipped one loop. No one unhooked, no one pried. Just loosened, as if his own hand hadn't tied it tight enough. The barn door was ajar. No creak, no resistance, no protest. He pushed it open. Inside, empty. No Merla, no drum, no goat kids, no claw marks, no scattered straw, no blood, no scent. Nothing to prove life had ever been here. Everything neat like a newly built barn. Never once used for livestock. Only a scrap of rough cloth stuck to the base of a post. He bent and picked it up. Thick cloth, the kind used to bind newborn bellies or seal mudgaps. On it, a dried blood stain, not spread, curled like flaking snakeskin. In the center, a tiny black object, oval like a button, pulsing slow but rhythmic. Not hurried, not weak. Like a heart that didn't need a body to keep beating. He reached out, to touch, but stopped midway. His hand didn't shake, just froze, as if the body already knew that if he touched, he couldn't pull back. He sat down, didn't pick it up, didn't walk away, just sat, facing the empty space in front of him. The barn wall bore a thin scratch, the length of a child's fingernail. Shallow, even, like scraped gently with a fine nail, not sharp enough to cut, just enough to leave a message without words. I'm not here anymore. He turned his head. The light outside hadn't changed, white, pale, shadowless. No one stood there. Merla was gone. For the first time since she arrived, dark, but as if the light was being held mid-air by something, refusing to fall. No goats, no breathing. Only the smell of mud mixed with ash, and the scorched metal scent, like someone once boiled medicine with blood. In the barn's corner, the old cloth used to cover firewood had been removed. Beneath it was a metal drum, lid slightly domed, tied with layers of hemp rope. He untied it, slowly, not out of fear, but because Each knot undone felt like waking something forced to sleep too long. The lid popped. No sound, just a thin warmth rising, like the last breath of someone passing quietly. Inside was a bovine fetus, but not a calf, about the size of a full-term newborn, skin wrinkled, hairless, forelegs curled tight to its belly, hind legs stretched straight, anatomically wrong. No blood, no umbilical cord, mouth sewn shut with copper wire. No nostrils, no pupils in the eyes, but the chest was rising and falling, slow, even, human-paced. He didn't back away, didn't vomit, just stood there, and gripping the drum's rim. Wind from outside couldn't enter the barn, like it was being pushed back. He leaned closer. The fetus twitched slightly, very slightly, like a spasm in someone's dream, touched by a memory they don't want to remember. At the corner of its mouth, just enough space for the copper wire to loop through, sat a droplet, clear, didn't drip, didn't dissolve, just clung there. A single tear. From where? When it had no eyes to cry. He reached in, not to touch, just to nudge the lid closed again. But the fetus turned its head. Not sudden, not lunging, just turned, as if it knew who he was, and wanted him to look, once, before he did something he couldn't undo. He straightened up, tied the rope back, not tight, not secure, just enough. As he turned away, he heard a faint tapping on the drum's bottom. 3 taps, spaced apart, like someone tapping in code. Out in the yard, he didn't go straight inside, just stood under the sky, looked down at his right hand. A thin line from the copper wire had marked his middle finger. No blood, no cut, just a sting, like a mark, light, enough to remember, but not something to ever tell. The next day he didn't go to the barn, didn't touch the water trough, just sat on the porch, back resting against the worn beam, opened the door. The 3 creatures still sat there, didn't sleep, didn't wait, didn't look at him, but stood as he did, didn't follow. Just kept a distance equal to their shadow, even without sun. In the house he left little behind, no dry rations, no knife, no water. Only the axe, left on the table. Handle pointed in, blade toward the door, not as threat, not for defense, just a full stop to what once was his. He didn't lock the door, didn't look back. Walked straight down the red dirt slope, where grass wouldn't grow, and stones lay scattered like animal teeth. From afar, his back showed a slight hunch, not from age, but as if something inside his chest no longer needed holding, had fallen to his belly, dragging the shoulders down. No one in the village saw him off, no one peeked from their doors, but at every fence corner, every cactus bush, he knew. Living eyes turned away, fearing contact with the unnamed. No one asked where he was going, because no one wanted to know if he left to forget or to remember. At one point, he stopped by the old post station, knocked twice on the rusted mailbox, then pulled something small from his pocket, a crescent-shaped metal tag, once used to mark goat kids. He slipped it into the mail slot, pushed it in. No letter, no cloth wrap, no note. Then walked on. The sun rose slowly, but brought no warmth, only enough light to see red dust hovering low, just above ground, like something refusing to vanish, refusing to fall. At the base of the slope, he found a long print, faded, as if stepped on and dragged. 3 parallel lines, not straight, not crooked, like someone had crawled with 2 hands and 1 knee, not to flee, but to pull themselves past a boundary. He didn't stop, didn't step aside. He stepped on it, kept walking. When he reached the land without grass, where wind doesn't loop back, he stopped, placed a hand on his chest. Didn't thump, didn't breathe heavy, just let it rest there, as if confirming that what once filled a space was now gone. Not light, not heavy, just gone. Ahead lay the old dirt road, leading into the nameless rock pass. No one who entered ever returned, but no one ever found bodies either. He walked in, without hesitation, no testing the path, no greeting the land, no waiting for a call. Just walked. Behind him, no steps, no tiny feet, no whispers, just that, after he vanished behind the rocks. A small black object like a pinhead, peeled skin on young fruit. The village didn't mention Merle. No one asked where he'd gone. No one dared ask if he'd return. Except one child at the tavern asked his mother that night, "Why won't the grass grow back toward the ranch?" She didn't answer, just held his hand, silent, then quietly closed up earlier than usual. The salt man passed the ranch, left a sack of salt on the porch as always. Didn't knock, didn't call. But this time, he also left a handful of dried onions, the kind Merle used to trade for goat hair. He didn't look back, just pulled his hand from his coat and found a thread of coarse cloth stuck to it. Not market fabric, not animal hair. He wiped it quickly on his pants, then walked faster, though no wind followed. A week later, the old woman who maintained the public water tank climbed up to check the one above the ranch. The level hadn't dropped, but hadn't overflowed either. Her hands smeared with dry mud. When rinsing under the tap, she saw a pale red streak drift from the pipe, smelling faintly like burnt radish. She told no one, just took the longer route from then on. Even though that season the longer path had snakes. On nights when the moon blurred, people in the village heard small footsteps circling the fence line. Not dogs, not people. The sound was uneven. 3 steps, pause, 2 steps, pause, as if the runner didn't know where to go, or was waiting for someone to wave them back. Some said, "If it has no feet, how can it make sound?" Others replied, "It's not that there are no feet, just not the kind meant to be seen." The children no longer dared climb the hill near the ranch, even though rare birds nested there. One kid once tried, but came back silent, just holding a lump of wet dirt in his hand, squeezing it until his fingers bruised. He didn't cry, didn't scream, just went quiet. The barn remained open. Each morning, sunlight reached a little farther in, but never touched the farthest wall. Once, a wounded fox crawled in for warmth. By morning, it lay at the barn door, eyes still open, no foam at the mouth, teeth intact, but fur fallen in even round patches, as if someone had trimmed it. It didn't die from hunger, nor from cold, but from not understanding what it had seen. An old sawyer once passed by, saw the barn door quiver threshold, No one could tell if they were marks of arrival or of departure. They didn't deepen, didn't fade, just stayed, as if waiting for a shadow to return so they could leave together. No one knew if the man still lived or had merged into dust. No one asked if the three small beings understood what father meant. That land remained as quiet as before, no more violent, no more gentle. Only now, since that day, no one tied cords to goat necks to control things they feared to understand. Maybe not everyone gets to choose what they must live with, but there are some who, simply by leaving without rejecting, leave behind a kind of tenderness that asks for no proof. If you've ever stayed because you couldn't bear to leave, or ever left because no one held you back, leave a word in the comments. It doesn't have to be long, just honest, because sometimes the strangest stories begin exactly where we once stayed silent.